with his love.
This meeting is being recorded.
Cutting out we'll change it. But in the meantime, let's this week's Torah portion Toldot. We have the handoff from Avraham to Yitzchak. Really, in a sense, definitively, Avraham is only mentioned briefly in this Torah portion. It is entirely the story of Yitzchak and how he engages with his children. Well, Yitzchak and Rivka, and how they Parsha opens up, right, that Rivka is barren. Story among the matriarchs and amongst of our great Jewish women, like Sarah, right, was barren.
You're coming in and out, my rabbi.
Yeah.
Can't have that. Let's try this. Let's try to see if this will be better. Here?
No, it's in and out, and you keep freezing.
Still working on it though.
Okay.
If you get when it should be better. Is it? Let's try now. Is it going to be? Is it better now?
Yes.
For the time being.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if this carries forward. If this carries forward, then we'll be in good shape. Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, so as we said, a relatively common circumstance throughout the great women of history, the great Jewish women of history. Sarah was barren, Rivka was barren, Rachel was barren, Hannah was barren, the mother of Shmuel, right? And the Rebbetzin was actually barren all the way through. The Rebbe's wife never had physical children. And in this case, I think a lot of it is the sense that a major break.
You're gone.
Frozen. You're gone, Rabbi.
No good. From the okay. Okay, does everybody hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay, let's hope this is better. Okay. So, yeah. So make sure this is being spotlighted for everybody. Okay. So there's a lot that is discussed about this. One of the ideas is that when there is a moment, a great leap forward, that it faces spiritual obstacles, right? Because the forces of opposition don't want this great breakthrough to happen. You have somebody like Yitzchak coming, or the completion of the Shvatim, there's going to be pushback. from those forces that want to put the kibosh on the spiritual forward progress. And that's why it takes the prayers, right? Avraham and Sarah praying, then Yitzchak and Rivka praying, to eventually push this through. Now, the story goes that Yitzchak and Rivka are the prayers are answered by God, and Rivka becomes pregnant, right? And famously, Vayisrotzatzu habanim bikirba. She feels the conflict within her own womb, right? And at the beginning, she doesn't know that she's carrying twins, and not only twins, but two nations, right? Two great nations. All she knows is that seemingly this child is very confused as to what it wants, right? She passes by a Beit Medrash, right? And the child pushes to get out. Then she passes by a place of idol worship, and the child is pushing to get out. So this is one very confused child. And she has an existential crisis. Because as the commentaries tell us, and we've talked about this in past times that we've learned, that she was really struggling not so much about the child, but this sets up something in general within ourselves, right? We deal with this existential crisis. I want to be in shul, and then I have this great desire to be in shul. I also simultaneously have this great desire to not be in shul, right? It's a weird thing. We come into shul because nobody forced us to be here. We come here of our own volition, but almost from the first minute of being in shul, I'm looking at the clock. When is this over? Right? So it's like, what's going on? Right? Do you want to be here or do you not want to be here? If you don't want to be here, leave. But in general, we have this.
But wait a minute. We're
Yes.
never looking at the clock during your darash.
The compliments are coming hot and heavy today. But the point is that it is not uncommon for us to be wanting to do a good thing and then simultaneously looking to be doing something else, or to want to do something bad while regretting it simultaneously. So who exactly are we? What is going on? And the answer that God gives Rivka through the Shem and Aver is the same answer to us, that we have two entities within us and they are constantly struggling, right? And interesting, just as the Torah lays out for Rivka, that Ravi Avot Seir, there's the older and then there's the younger. And the older entity is not the good entity. It's actually the negative entity. The older entity, the elder brother, as it were, in this case, is the negative force, is the animalistic force. While the scholar force, the force for purity and scholarly study and everything else that Yaakov represents, is the younger. Same way in a person. You have two Yetzers, or as Tanya clarifies, you actually have two complete souls. And one is the Nefesh HaBahamit, the animal soul, one is the godly soul. And interestingly enough, the Nefesh HaBahamit is considered the older one of the two, not the godly soul. The godly soul is called the Hanefesh HaShenit. The second soul is Tanya lays on. The first chapter of Tanya tells you about your animal soul. The second chapter of Tanya is the one that actually tells us about our godly soul and calls it the second soul. Because realistically, that's actually how they develop in you. You become aware of it. The first soul, the animal soul, is that which drives your natural instincts and tendencies. And that comes online immediately. The first thing a child does, right, when it's born, is complain about the circumstances, right? You come out of the womb complaining, right? Think about it. It's like, and until you complain, in fact, if you don't complain, it's a problem. It's like, oh my God, the baby hasn't cried yet, right? We come out of the womb complaining, straight out of the gate, right? Oh, it's cold, I'm hungry, right? Where's the couch? They call this a lobby? Oh, I'm kidding. Anyway, but right. The thing is that the animal soul has to come online immediately because you need to breathe, you need to eat, right, etc. So you need to be able to complain when you're cold. So something, so you get taken care of, etc. So the animal soul comes online right away, almost fully developed. It takes a couple of years, probably 3-4 years, whatever it is, to fully develop, into which, to a certain degree, of some semblance of an awareness of your faculties and your ability to pursue things, etc. Then from that point forward, you're really kind of developing your prowess, not really the faculties themselves, but your prowess. You get better at it, right? But a child already at a young age, right, even from kind of about 3 or 4 years old, already understands what it wants from a kind of a natural perspective, how to get it, right? Children are very good at getting what they want. They're very good manipulators, sometimes good at telling little fibs, etc., etc. Why? Why are they very good at this? They engage in behavior that is not acceptable for an adult. Because, for that very reason, their animal soul is fully online, but their godly soul is not. Their godly soul takes 12 to 13 years to fully come online. Girls, it comes online a year earlier, right? Girls are more spiritually in tune, and so they get there a year earlier than guys do, legally, halachically, right? That's what a bar bat mitzvah is. The moment, the milestone of being able to take responsibility for your actions is because at this point, your godly soul is enough online, is developed enough that you now know the difference between good behavior and bad behavior, and why you should be doing the good thing and the bad thing. And then you're expected to not be a manipulator, to not be a liar, etc., but to do that which is right. So ultimately, your godly soul is that's the second part of your consciousness to come online, not the first part. But even as such, the prophecy that is given to Rivka is Virav Ya'avod Tza'ir, that the elder one will serve the younger one, even as Ula'om Mil'om Yamatz, even as they will struggle against each other, and one will always be over on top. So if the other one's on top, it's a zero-sum game. Either one's on top or the other one's on top. They cannot both be on top. So one is up, the other one's down. When that one's down, the other one's up, and we know this about ourselves, right? That to a certain degree, you can't just maintain this kind of neutral thing. Either you throw in with your godly soul, you throw in with your animal soul, but ultimately, V'rav Ya'avod Tza'ir, the good, the elder will serve the younger. Now, that's a very important point. In a moment, it doesn't say that the younger one will overpower and push out the elder. It says that the elder one will serve the younger. And that immediately establishes a certain principle and approach to this. But let's hold this for a moment. Back to our story. With this, Rivka understands what's going on inside of her, and to a certain degree clarifies for all of us what's going on inside ourselves. Then comes the moment, and the babies are born, right? And the first one comes out, Rishon Admoni, Kulo Kaderet Seyar. It comes out red and hairy and developed, and is a sight to behold. Vayikru Shemo Esav, and they all called his name Esav. Everybody was there. He was the talk of the town. This was really a uniquely developed child. And then comes out Yaakov, and he shows a little bit of his innate tenaciousness. Because what's he doing? He's grabbing on to Esav's heel. Ultimately, he says, you will never be entirely without me grabbing a little bit of you. Right? And that's an important point, right? And they call him, and he calls him Yaakov. It doesn't say and they, it says and he. Right? If you want to see this inside, you can look with me on page 287 in the book. Well, let's back up a little bit. On 286, the last column. right? And his hand was holding fast to the heel of Esav, right? A lot of interesting things, right? The Torah takes note of this, and ultimately it becomes his whole name, right? His whole name becomes Yaakov because he's holding on to the Akev of Esav. So this is not a small thing. So, and this is the first indication, right? We said most children come out of the world, come out of the womb, and the first thing they do is complain. Yaakov was doing something else. The first thing he was doing. First thing he was doing as he came out of the womb was holding on to the heel of his brother. Lot there, right? On page, go to on 286, that last column. Jacob was trying to prevent Esau from emerging first so that he, Yaakov, would be the firstborn in the legal sense, as he was the firstborn in essence. What does that mean, that he was the firstborn in essence?
That spiritual being is greater than physical prowess.
You're saying firstborn in in what he brings to the table, as it were.
Yeah.
The qualities he brings to the table. Anybody else?
Well, it could be just purely biological of how the cells are divided and such, and that's in essence as in a physical essence.
Oh, so interesting. Yes, Sandy, believe it or not, the Talmud says on this something along the lines that you're saying. The child, think about a tube, right? And dropping marbles or something into a tight tube. The marble that goes in first comes out last. So that, interestingly enough, Yaakov was actually the first one in the chute, as it were. And then was the second one out. And he was claiming making a legal case that I should be the first one. Because in fact, I am the elder one. And almost from on a soul level, he knew there was going to be significant ramifications to whichever one was going to be recognized as the firstborn, right? The firstborn birthright that is going to be that which becomes a point of conflict for Yaakov and Esav, not just over the course of their entire lives, but for, as we see now, for millennium. This is kind of the key conflict. Who is the primary child? Who is the primary inheritor? Right? Because it's interesting. Last week's Torah portion, when it came to burying Abraham, it says that Yishmael and Yitzchak, right, are coming to bury. Who does it says bury him first? Who takes precedent in the burial? It says, Vayikberu Oto, and buried him, Yitzchak v'Yishmael. That Yitzchak was first. Yishmael acquiesced. And that's why he says he passed away, Yishmael passed away a righteous Gentile. Because ultimately he did not challenge Yitzchak's birthright. And he allowed Yitzchak to take the primary role. Esav went to his grave challenging Yaakov and never acquiesced, and his children haven't either. And that is why Esav dies a Yisrael Mumar, a Jewish heretic. Yishmael was a righteous Gentile, and Esav was a Jewish heretic. Yes, Paula.
Two things. One, why didn't Rivka take a page out of Sarah's book? Sarah banished Hagar and Ishmael. This is not something that Rivka considered, at least as I read the text.
Yes, correct.
Oh Lord, what was the second thing? What was the last thing you just said?
About the difference between Yishmael and Esav. Yishmael being a righteous Gentile.
Right. So after Yitzchak gives Yaakov the second blessing, the one that Esav overhears. He says to himself, I'm going to kill my brother, but he doesn't do it. And I'm wondering if that's a little spark of redemption for him.
Oh, good. The answer to both your questions is a similar point.
Oh, good.
Esav has a role to play in the Jewish story, different than Ishmael does. Ishmael was right. He says, this is a divergent storyline. Let's separate it now. Ishmael does not have what to contribute to the Jewish story. But I already mentioned, right, a spoiler, when I said that V'rav Ya'avod Sa'ir, that the elder will serve the younger, not cut it out, not get rid of it. That ultimately the ideal circumstance is not that Esav is gone, but is that Esav collaborates. And we're going to show how this and why this is the case. So that's the reason Rivka understands that Esav cannot be banished. Esav has a role to play. Number one. And number two, that is why ultimately Esav, even though his entire, right, is pushing him to kill Yaakov, something is holding him back. This innate sense that Rav Ya'avod Sa'ir, right? And we see this multiple times, right? When that big confrontation is happening and Esav's got all the advantage, right? He has the military advantage, right? And he wants to, he then, something in him holds him back, right? Because that's ultimately part of the master plan over here is that he has a positive role to play in what's called story, in Yaakov's story. And we're going to get to that. Because then we get, so anyways, right? So Yaakov is holding on to the heel of Esav, right? Because he has a legal sense of this, right? Right? Then the Gemara says something fascinating still on the bottom of 286. Although Esav received the temporal world and Jacob the world to come, right? That was kind of how they divided, right? You have the physical world, and Yaakov, you have the world to come. This is the Esav's domain. This is where Esav thrives, and the Jewish people, we know this world is not always very accommodating to us. Our world is the world to come, right? But Yaakov still said, no. Yaakov grasps the heel of Esav because he grasps the heel of Esav's portion. Toward the end of the temporal world, Jacob will gain ascendancy. This is why our sages refer to this period as the heels of Mashiach. Because when Mashiach comes, right, even in the lead up to Mashiach, the Jews will actually start to have a moment of ascendancy before the world to come. There will be already a taste of the heel. That's why it's referred to. The days right before Mashiach are called the heels of Mashiach.
Chavlei HaMashiach.
Right. Oh no, but ikveta.
Ah,
Ikveta de Mashiach. Ikveta de Mashiach. The heel, it's Aramaic, but the heels of Mashiach. Okay. So now comes a deeper question, as it says, if you must imitate the Gentile, top of 287, why emulate the lowliest and most debased in their world? Why grasp the heel, Esav's heel, and not, for example, at his head? Is the question put forward by Rav Yitzchak Isaac Friedman. So the Rebbe explains, no, Yaakov is not grasping the heel of Esav because he covets the heel of Esav, but rather Jacob is born grasping Esav's heel because this is the purpose for which Jacob comes down to this world. The godly soul is perfect, and it is a perfect relationship with God. Right? For itself, it lacks nothing. The purpose of its terrific descent into the physical world is to rectify and elevate Esav, the animal soul, the body, and the material world. Yaakov is not coveting the heel of Esav for himself. He's holding on to the heel of Esav because he's a man on a mission. He was sent down here to do something, to elevate something, to elevate Esav. And now we're going to get into a very fascinating conversation. Because the Torah now tells us something about Yitzchak and Rivka, their first disagreement, their first philosophical disagreement, which is top of page 288. Vayehav Yitzchak es Esav ki tzayid befiv. Right? Yitzchak loved Esav because his trappings, his game, Esav's game was in his mouth, right? Simply in Yitzchak's mouth, right? So he loved him because apparently Yitzchak likes barbecue, right? And Esav was very good at getting him barbecue. V'Rivka I have SS Yaakov. And Rivka loves Yaakov, no explanation needed. That's the more intuitive and obvious one, right? It's Yitzchak that's the one that warrants explanation. So much so that we don't even like the explanation given. What in the world do you mean? That Yitzchak loved Esav because his trappings was in his mouth? Is Yitzchak this kind of person? Right? Oh, you made me spare ribs. Oh, I love you now, right? What's going on here? And by the way, this carries all the way through, right? Ultimately, when it's time to give the bracha, right, he feels it's right and correct to give the bracha to Esav, even knowing that this bracha is more than just a blessing, it's a legacy. It is the entirety of the divine mission given to mankind. Really the entirety of the purpose of all of creation is the mission of mankind that is going to be led by the Jewish people. And here he is saying it's going to be Abraham, Yitzchak, and Esav. Right? It sounds wrong, right?
Now it does.
Yeah. Right. It has nothing to do with the fact that we've been saying Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov for thousands of years. No, just inherently. But this is the way Yitzchak was ready to have it be. And it was only because of Rivka's intervention and then Yaakov's act of deception that it ended differently.
I have
So
a
the
quick
question is-
question.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Don't be sorry.
But,
Interrupt.
we just had read that Abraham must listen to Sarah. I mean, not listen. It was more than listen. He must do what she told him to do. That's how I understood it. So it seems like pretty straightforward what should have happened here.
Yeah. So why doesn't Rivka, you're saying, come to Yitzchak and say, no, my dear husband, you have it wrong, right? Is what you're asking.
Right, because that's already been established, unless it's just specifically those of us like with myself, whose wife's Hebrew name is Sarah, asked to listen to his wife over.
So you're saying because my wife's name is not Sarah, I got a free pass. Yeah. So the answer is because in a lot of things, this is exactly where there's layers to this that really truly add significant nuance. And we're going to go into this exactly. Your question, we're going to circle back to answer your question because I'll ask a different point. Well, later in this story, right, very shortly from here, right, it says that Yaakov is cooking a bowl of lentil soup, right, in the loss of Abraham. It's Abraham had just passed away. And interestingly enough, this was Yitzchak, and this was Yaakov and Esav's two different. Really, they were immediately went to their natures in dealing and coping with the loss of their illustrious grandfather. This is the day that Abraham dies. Yaakov goes and he prepares a soup, that nutrition, the comfort, the consolation, to be able to deal with this, right? The lentils around to speak to the circle of life, etc., etc. What's Esav doing in the meantime? Esav sets out to kill Nimrod. When it says that he comes back from the field that he is tired, he's coming back from the killing field. he could not bear the idea that his grandfather's arch enemy, Nimrod, should live longer than his grandfather. So he says, if Avram dies today, then Nimrod dies today. And that's what he does. He puts Nimrod to death. He kills him. He goes and he assassinates Nimrod. And obviously, Nimrod is not just sitting there allowing him to do it. It takes Esav's incredible prowess. And he comes back, and this is why he's so exhausted. I'm almost going to die here. Right? What? You just went hunting. You go hunting every day. Why all of a sudden you're so exhausted? No. This was not a regular day of hunting. This is him taking out the most powerful guy in the world.
So this midrash comes from that small. Oh my
There's
goodness.
There's a lot that lead into that. But
Okay.
yes, the midrash tells us this. Yes. So this right here immediately gives us a sense of the difference between Yaakov and Esav, right? This is two different ways of one is working on self-betterment, and one is sitting there and raging against the world, right? Either way, all this, and by the way, this is what makes it even so back to my point, that he sells the birthright, right? Yaakov says, if you want this bowl of lentil soup, I want your birthright, right? And he does, he sells it for a bowl of lentil soup. So then comes the question, you're concerned about Rivka not speaking up, right? And engaging in this act of subterfuge, as it were, in order to help to get Yaakov the birthright. What about Yaakov speaking up? When Yitzchak comes to says, "Okay, I'm coming. It's time to hand over the blessing and the birthright to Esav. Go get me food." The next thing that should have happened is Yaakov goes and politely taps on his father's door and says, "Dad, I was hoping we wouldn't come to this because Esav should have told you, but he actually already sold me the birthright. It's mine by rights." Voila, end of issue. Right?
I thought the birthright and the blessing were two separate things.
Nope. The birthright was the blessing, and the blessing was the birthright. Because the blessing, and this is why when Esav comes and says, "You don't have the blessing for me," he says, "No, I don't have this kind of blessing for you. I can give you a different blessing. I can't give you the same blessing." Because it's not just blessing. This is the blessing. This is the blessing that is the spiritual wherewithal to carry out the birthright. By bestowing the blessing on Yaakov, I have given him the mission and the wherewithal to achieve it. And this is why Esav is so incensed. Because his plan, clearly, when he was so quickly to get rid of the birthright for the bowl of lentil soup, is going to say, "I'm going to come by and take it anyway." And when Yaakov succeeded in getting what kind of was rightfully agreed upon, Esav flies into a rage. And says, "Well, I guess there's only one other way for me to get it back. It's me to assassinate the one who has it." And he does, by the way, Paula. He does put in an effort. He himself doesn't do it, but he sends his son Eliphaz to go kill Yaakov.
Absolutely.
But either way, coming back to this, so there's a couple puzzling aspects to this. So far, the story we've already discussed a couple of them. Yitzchak and his strange preference to Esav, and especially when the Torah goes by way of explaining it, only makes it even more confusing because of the fact that he makes him, because the trappings are in his mouth, right? And then Rivka staying silent, Yaakov staying silent. What is going on? So let's back up. And this is very fascinating. Rashi doesn't either like the simple explanation, which indicates immediately to you when Rashi, there's a general rule about Rashi. Rashi is ben chamesh lemikra. Rashi says, I am writing it for the most perfect, or the most ideal 5-year-old. The ideal 5-year-old who, according to Pirkei Avot, should master Chumash, but master the simple understanding of Chumash. So if what is being taught in the Torah doesn't need explanation, it's understood on the surface, right? in its basic explanation, then I don't need to step in. I only need to step in when the basic explanation does not suffice. Because that would have a 5-year-old saying, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So that's why I would need to explain. But otherwise, that's why Rashi is not on every word. If there is a simple explanation and it makes sense, Rashi says, so it says, if the simple explanation that Yitzchak was the kind of person who enjoyed barbecue, then Rashi wouldn't need to step in. But Rashi says even a 5-year-old understands that Yitzchak, our great patriarch Yitzchak, is not going to choose a child because he brings him good barbecue. So what does the Rashi say? He says you're reading the words wrong. The trappings, his trappings were in his mouth. It's not that Esav's trappings were in Yitzchak's mouth, but rather Esav's trappings were in his own mouth. And when we mean trappings, we don't mean what he caught in the field, but rather he trapped his father with his mouth. And Rashi cites the Medrash Tanchuma by way of explanation. Here it is. On top of 288, that first column, the game was in his mouth. Esav would deceive Isaac with his mouth. Esav would deceive Yitzchak with his mouth. He would inquire of him, Father, how does one tithe salt? Father, how does one tithe straw? And Yitzchak would muse, for this son of mine, how diligent he is in the fulfillment of the commandments. Right? Okay. Now, that's what it says. Kasavar aviv shemedaktiv b'mitzvos. Right? He says, Heyach ma'asri nesamelach. How does one tithe salt? And his father was, oh, wow, look at special my son is. Okay, so now you say, wait a minute. So Yitzchak, apparently you were blind already, right? Your physical blindness doesn't come till later. But you're clearly blind as to the nature of your son, right? You're so easily tricked that you believe that your Esav is this great conscientious observer of the mitzvot, that when he comes and just asks, how does one tithe salt? Right? Wait, you sit, and he's asking, what? Do you count out every 10th grain? Like you go, 1 grain of salt, 2 grains of salt, 3 grains of salt, 1/10, put it aside. Now continue. I only have 5 billion left, right? Right? So he said, oh, my son is so careful with the mitzvot, right? That's one way. But again, that seems to not, again, only further, was Yitzchak really that blind as to who Esav was? The answer is we know he wasn't. Because when Yaakov comes, right, in the guise of Esav to later get the blessings, he uses polite language, right? He says, come, father, please get up. Please sit over here. Let me give you. He says, oh, you found it so quickly. Yes, God help me. He says, this does not sound like Esav, right?
He knew something was up.
Yeah, and he says, come here, let me feel you, right? And then he feels his hands, and when he feels the rough hair of his hands, because his mother put the goat skin on it, and he says, famously, right, Hakol Kol Yaakov, this is the voice of Jacob, but the actions are the hands of Esav, right? So he already knows that his son Esav is a gruff and a animalistic type of individual, and Yaakov is the refined, scholarly one. So he knows his kids very well. So what does it mean that that Esav comes and says, how does one tithe salt? And he's like, oh, my son Esav is such a tzaddik, right? It's like, it's like a preschool teacher, right? Oh, my child is such an angel, right? And the teacher's like, you mean that the one who just tore apart the whole classroom, right? Such an angel, right? You have that. Sometimes parents are blinded. They're just blind to the children. But this was not the case with Yitzchak. Yitzchak knew who Esav was. So what does this mean? Again, it only makes the question stronger. Where they say he really, just because he asked him such a question, he became blind to who he really was, But here's the beautiful, beautiful, perfect answer of the Rebbe. Because perfect, I'm saying it's so perfectly Rebbe. Because it unlocks such academic insight. Like, of course, that's the only way all those dots connect, but it also makes an incredibly, very fascinating point. Yitzchak is a different person than Avraham. In fact, the Torah highlights that by saying, Ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham holidet Yitzchak, right? This is the story of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, Avram who birthed, Avram birthed Yitzchak. We said, wait a minute, if he's Yitzchak ben Avram, then yeah, of course, Avram holidet Yitzchak. What do I need to say both of those? So the Midrash says something beautiful. Avraham started a family business, right? Something that was, he put his entire, it was his everything, right? This service of God, the spreading of God's message, etc., right? He then took this precious thing that he worked on his entire life and he put it into the hands of his son Yitzchak. And what did Yitzchak do? Immediately took it in a different direction, in a completely different approach, in a completely different direction. Right? It's like, for example, somebody builds a business from scratch, opens up 30, 40 stores, right? Hands it over to his son. His son immediately shuts all the stores, fires all the employees, and turns it into an online business. Right? We can imagine that dad is going to be a little bit miffed. Right? And what his son says, I built this from scratch, I handed it to you, and you went entirely. And the son can make an argument, yes, but my approach is the better approach. It's being living with the times. It's still, the dad would be like, that's not, I did it just perfectly my way. Now why are you immediately taking and changing the approach? Abraham was midat hachesed. He was expansive. He reached out to people. He traveled. He spread the message as far and as wide as he could. Yitzchak never left home. Avram worked on tens of thousands. Yitzchak worked on 2. Right? Avraham dissipated. Yitzchak dug. Right? He dug wells. He dug
so
down.
did Abraham.
But Avram's wells, you see, it didn't last. The Torah tells us that Avram was not successful. Each one of his wells were later closed up by Avimelech. Yitzchak dug, and they stuck. Because Avram was doing it among all the things that he was doing. He dug a well and let it kind of like chesed. He goes, drops his inspiration and carries on. And it could be on a spiritual level. Avram is he's dropping his inspiration to as many people as he can. Quantity, right? Quantity. What do you sacrifice with quantity? Quality, the staying power of what you're doing. Because you say, I'm going to drop, I'm running, I got to go teach somebody else. Yeah, you got it? You heard me? Great, good. Going on to the next one. You've inspired? Wonderful, great, next. But it doesn't stick it out with that person. He doesn't stay put. Yitzchak says, no, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to teach a total of 2 students only. I'm going to dig, right? That's chofer be'eris. Yitzchak chofer be'eris. Now, the thing is, what was beautiful about it is that each one, even though they saw things diametrically opposite, very much respected and lauded the other one's approach. Ele told us, Yitzchak ben Avraham. Yitzchak said, you know who I am? You know what makes me great? I'm the son of Avraham. Yitzchak was incredibly proud to be the son of Avraham. And Avram, to his credit, also says, who am I? Avram shaholidet Yitzchak. I am Avram who birthed Yitzchak. He was so proud. He says, my greatest accomplishment is I am Avram, the father of Yitzchak. So Yitzchak, what's my greatest thing? That I'm the son of Avram. And Avram says, what's my greatest thing? That I'm the father of Yitzchak. So even though they went in 2 completely different directions, they each had a very deep respect. But now it's the era of Yitzchak. Yitzchak's approach is to dig wells. What does it mean to dig a well? To dig a well means that on the surface, the water's not there. But you have a sense that the potential exists here. If you just dig deep enough, you're going to uncover an unbelievable potential. This is Yitzchak's mentality. This is Yitzchak's approach. Yitzchak likes projects. He likes a project, right? He likes taking something, digging and digging and digging it until he finds the potential.
But he didn't have to do that with Yaakov, only with Esau.
Aha, that's why he likes Esau.
Uh-huh.
Esau knows, both of them know this about their father. So Esav manipulates. Tzad, ki tzad es aviv. He trapped his father. Because what does he say? He says, Abba heach ma'asrin nesama. Listen to this profound, brilliant thought of the Rebbe. He says, why does the Talmud use as a metaphor, Father, how does one tithe salt? That's a ridiculous question. Why would that inspire your father? How does one tithe salt? Okay, if you want to tithe it, go weigh it. It's right. It's 20 pounds. 2 pounds of it is your tithe. Go take it. You have 10 pounds, 1 pound, right? What's the question? Why should it be any different than anything else? Why? As his father says, oh my gosh, that's such an inspirational question. It has moved my entire perspective of you. I now love you because you asked me this kind of question. The Rebbe says, no, it's specifically salt. He specifically asked him about salt. Why? How do you measure the value of salt? Do you measure it by its face value? Or do you measure it by its potential value? Salt is this unique thing. A spice is a unique thing. How much does it cost a container of salt? $3, right? For a whole container of salt for $3. But if you take just a pinch of salt and you apply it correctly to a dish, you enhance the dish from being a $3 dish to a $20 dish. Spice has that ability. There's its face value and its potential value. And Esav is saying, how do you tithe salt, i.e., how do you measure the value of salt? Are you just going to look at its face value? Or are you going to appreciate its potential? And Yitzchak says, that is a fascinating point. And who's Esav really talking about? Himself. He's saying at face value, I'm a heathen. I'm a barbarian. But look at all the potential, the raw potential in me. I am a monster. Can you imagine if I'd be the monster of God? All that strength and all that prowess. If you just invest in me, if you dig deep in me, I'm a project. Granted, I'm a project, but I'm a project with so much potential. And he trapped his father with this. He trapped his father with this. He made the claim, Yaakov is better on the surface, but I'm the one with the potential. Who do you want to leave the legacy of the Jewish people in the hand of this little, the schnook in the Beit Medrash? Or do you want to hand it to me? I'm this tough guy and I'm going to push through, right? I will face the world down because I'm Esav. Yeah, maybe I need some direction right now. I need fine tuning and tweaking and refining, but I'm the one with the potential. How do you measure the value of salt? Esav, Yitzchak, my father, that's your nature, is to dig deep and uncover potential. I'm your project. Yes, Julia.
I just can't not say how relevant this is to Israel today, because we need both aspects. We need both strength and spirituality. I mean, it's amazing to me.
So here's the thing, and so then you really like the follow-up, okay? Now, ultimately, we know Esav is wrong, and Yitzchak would have been wrong in giving it to him. Why? Because still waters run deep. Turns out that Yaakov doesn't just have the value on the surface, but when push comes to shove, the perseverance is not in Esav's hands. He has the prowess, but he doesn't have the perseverance. He's Gevura, but Yaakov is Akev. Yaakov is a heel. He's humble. He's quiet. He's at the bottom, but it's the toughest part of you. And that there's no one who shows his resilience among the patriarchs like Yaakov. He faces down Esav, he faces down Lavan, and he wins against all of them. Because, and here is the point. Why does not Rivka advocate for Yaakov? Because she needs Yaakov to advocate for Yaakov. She needs Yaakov to step into this moment. When the push comes to shove and the chips are on the table and you have a choice to make, do you have it within you, Yaakov, to do what it takes to see this through?
That was
So
exactly exactly, and it is in Israel too. You have to have the brains, the spirit, absolutely.
and the fortitude.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, and I'll finish on this. Rabbi Steinsaltz was invited by Ron Dermer. Steinsaltz was in town for something. While Ron Dermer was a member of the shul, he considered himself a philosophical disciple of Steinsaltz. He never actually studied under him in one of his institutions, but his children did. His children went to one of Steinsaltz's institutions, and he would constantly engage with Steinsaltz question, whatever it was. So when Steinsaltz came to town, Ron asked him a personal favor: "Can you come and give a class to a group of people that I'll have in my house?" He invited me as his personal rabbi and a lot of the hoity-toity Jews of Washington. Yeah, so you had Ted Deutsch there and a couple of judges and what was attaché, etc. And a very fancy class. We all sat around the table. Everybody had their little nameplate in front of them, right, etc. And it was a very exclusive group. And everybody assumed that this was going to be with significant gravitas, and they were going to ponder great ideas. And that Rabbi Steinsaltz would come in, Rabbi Steinsaltz, with all the seriousness and scholarliness, etc. Except they don't know Steinsaltz. They didn't know Steinsaltz. You see, Steinsaltz was one of the greatest minds of our generation, and he was also an absolute gadfly. And he enjoyed having fun. This was his nature, twinkle in his eye, and a little bit of almost childlike enjoyment of doing things a little bit different than most would assume. So he came in, and I saw it on his face. I'm like, oh boy, this group is not ready for what's about to happen here. And he sits down, and it was sometime in the year, but he decided, says, his way of study, they're going to study this portion. He says, how is it possible? How is it possible that the entire legacy and birthright of the Jewish people came down to Jacob through an act of deception, a deception against his father, no less? So each one of them posits an answer, something cogent, something nice, something meaningful, something inspirational. Each one is going around the table, brilliant people around the table, and Steinsaltz, in only the way he can, knocks them all off with quotes and from all sources that he has the entire Torah at his fingertips, and he knocks each one answer off. So finally, one of them says, "Okay, so Rabbi, so what is in fact the answer?" So Rabbi Steinsaltz looks everybody in the face. He says, "Because sometimes life is messy." And he just drops this. It's like, what do you mean? And he says, sometimes life is messy and you have to do messy things. And the point was, Yaakov didn't initiate this circumstance. Esav did. Esav, he had legally given up the birthright. Now he's coming by to try and take it anyway. So the circumstance got messy. Now, Yaakov, you can either choose to stand on your position, your standard, whatever it is, and then allow the catastrophic result of the birthright going to Esav. Or you have to do what you need to do here. And they're like, no, Rabbi, you can't say that. This doesn't match the ideal thing of Yaakov and his integrity. And he just kept at it, and he got up and walked out, and he left. They were very unsatisfied. And he couldn't care less. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, that is vintage Steinsaltz. Like, if you ask any of them, did he enjoy that? They're like, I don't know. I don't think I did. They would have, but he was on. But in his brilliant way, he was making a point to all these movers and shakers, American Jews, and that are living in their comfort or whatever it is, and saying sometimes Israel has to get messy, and whether you like it or not, that's the way it has to be. Because Israel can either choose to roll over or play dead, or do what at times it needs to do. Nobody wants tens of thousands dead in Gaza. But we didn't start this. So we can either just roll over and do what the rest of the world says, oh, you should just be willing to take it and just roll over and play dead and feed your enemies as they're coming to kill you. Or you can say, like Yaakov, that I'd rather not have to do it this way. But if you think I'm going to be a pushover, I'm going to be a kunalemel, then you don't know who you're messing with. And Yaakov was underestimated by Esav, he was underestimated by Lavan, and ultimately the world constantly underestimates the Jewish people, not just because we have secret strength and also the secret ability to engage in subterfuge if necessary. That's not the point. Rather, we have that strength and awareness that there are certain things that we have to do whatever we can for. The legacy and the birthright of Klal Yisrael. Esav, you may have the surface level of prowess, but the deep well of perseverance and commitment, that's mine. You were willing to sell this for a bowl of lentil soup. And I will do everything I can to protect it and preserve it. And that's me, Yaakov. Rivka saw this. Rivka says, I see the potential, but Yaakov, this is the test. I'm not going to go in and hold your hand. I'm not going to advocate on your behalf. You go and make it happen. Show me what I see in you. Rise to the moment. And he does. And so I think ultimately a very powerful message in this parsha, the nuance of who Esav is and who Yaakov is, and ultimately it will be Yaakov that will carry the day, because Yaakov, more than anybody else, understands what one has to be committed for the sake of the legacy of being Klal Yisrael. And that's why we call ourselves B'nai Yisrael. All right, everybody?
Remind me to tell you sometime about my experience in a similar situation with Rabbi Steinsaltz.
Okay.
For another time.
Yes.
But I
Shabbos.
understand everything you were saying. Good
Yes.
Shabbos.
Okay.
Good Shabbos, everybody.
Thank
right.
you, Rabbi.
Absolutely. All the very best, everybody.